wake of a shocking not guilty verdict in the Kate Steinle murder trial last Thursday night in San Francisco, one Republican lawmaker is fighting back against sanctuary cities with a provocative new bill.
Yeah, here it is. It's called the SLAPP Act. It was introduced Monday and is one of the most aggressive sanctuary city bills to date, threatening officials who shelter illegals and don't cooperate with law enforcement with up to 5 years in jail and massive fines. Joining us right now with more is the author of that bill, Indiana Congressman Todd Rokita. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. Tell me about the SLAPP Act. How is this supposed to be implemented?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you have, these sanctuary cities need to end. And if they harbor legal criminals, and if these politicians don't obey a valid, constitutionally upheld federal law, if they're going to act like criminals themselves, then we ought to lock them up.
So, Congressman, if you look at the Kate Steinle case, where this guy he had 7 felonies, he was deported 5 times, he had an ICE waiver out for him, and yet the San Francisco sheriff released him 2 months before he killed Kate Steinle. Who would you wind up suing in that case?
Well, it's a matter of criminal charges, and under the SLAPP Act, if you fail to abide by a federal custody order, that's a violation of federal law, and you can be, it's a felony under the SLAPP Act.
Would you be going after the
felony.
mayor of San Francisco or the sheriff of San Francisco?
Well, any elected official who would be liable, so who ignored the federal order. I mean, that's what we're going after, and it's a felony. 5 years imprisonment, up to $1 million of fines.
Yeah.
If they're going to act like criminals themselves, if they're going to put the interests of these illegal immigrant criminals above the safety of their own citizens, then we ought to lock them up.
So, Congressman, the thing that got us to this point is because no one's following the law. So
right.
The sanctuary cities are illegal, number one. You should not be letting people here stay illegally, number one. So the new attorney general says, if you guys don't do this, if you don't start implementing immigration laws, I'm going to stop giving you federal funds. And the judges stood up and said to the judge, many cases, and said, hey, you know what? You can't do that, Attorney General Sessions. So therefore, you have to step up with the SLAPP Act. What kind of support have you gotten?
Well, we've gotten some great support. This bill was just dropped Friday. I expect to get some good support this week in Congress. We need co-sponsors. In fact, just walking over here, Scott Perry, my good friend from Pennsylvania, said he'd support it. So as members are learning about it, it's picking up steam. But just like everything, if your viewers need to call in, it could call in and show that they support this. This is what President Trump needs, and Attorney General Sessions needs to enforce the law. That would be great. It's H.R. 4526.
Okay, H.R. 4526, that's House resolution. What about over in the Senate? Because if you guys pass it, it's going to go to the Senate. Do you have any support there yet?
Well, I hope to get a companion bill. We're starting to talk with senators right now on that. But it's one of the reasons I'm running for Senate out of Indiana is because of what's not getting done over in the Senate. And we really need to change that. We saw the power of a Senate vote in a very terrible way with the health care bill. And we continue to see how hard it is to get things done. We can change those things.
So, by the way, Senator Joe Donnelly is one of the people the president was told to target because he's so-called moderate. That's the seat you'd be running for. Is he a moderate?
He votes with Bernie Sanders 80% of the time.
Okay.
Enough said.
So
you think that represents people of Indiana?
Absolutely not, and that's why he's got to go. Joe must go, and we're going to get the job done.
All right.
The growing fallout over the Kate Steinle verdict and the shock and outrage over the acquittal of her killer on murder charges. It all boils down to this. Kate's killer should have never been in the country. Jose Inez Garcia Zarate, who was previously deported from the U.S. 5 times, was in a position to kill only because of a San Francisco insane sanctuary city status. And by the way, he's hardly alone. 22% of the federal inmate population in California are suspected illegal immigrants. 121 criminal aliens released by ICE between 2010 and 2014 were later charged with homicide. That's blood on their hands, my friends. And 2,139 DACA recipients have lost permits because of criminal or public safety concerns. Now, everybody wants to say the Dreamers represent the best of the young people in the country. Every Dreamer is a valedictorian or saves cats from trees. But is that true? Well, they've experienced the painful and personal consequences of loss and death due to our insane immigration policies. I'm talking about the victims of crimes. because they've experienced these personal consequences of loss and death and life and death lost. Don Rosenberg is joining us in Westlake Village, California. He lost his son, the 25-year-old Drew, when he was killed in 2010 by a Honduran who entered the country illegally but earned protected status. And joining us from Chicago, Brian McGann's brother, Dennis, was killed in 2010 by a drunk driving illegal immigrant. And in Phoenix, Steve Ronenbeck's son, 21 years old, Grant, was working overnight on a shift at a convenience store when he was basically executed by an illegal immigrant over a pack of cigarettes. Gentlemen, I wanted to talk to all of you since this Kate Steinle verdict came down. And I think, Steve, I want to go to you first because, as I understand it, your son's murderer is awaiting trial at this moment. Your reaction to the Kate Steinle acquittal yesterday?
You know, I was absolutely stunned. And after that, it was just heartbroken for the Steinle family. I know that I can speak for Don and Brian and all the other victims' families, that our hearts go out to the Steinle family. It's just a travesty. You know, this man gave several different stories as to what actually happened. He never gave an honest answer. They still don't know exactly how he got the gun, but then they acquit him of murder or even manslaughter. I don't know. I can't wrap my head around it.
Bob, I want to go to you. The loss, whether it's a drunk driving illegal immigrant, a hit and run illegal immigrant, involuntary manslaughter, although this creep didn't even get that in the Steinle case. He's getting off basically scot-free in a couple more months of time after time served. What does this tell you about DACA and all the concern now about the DACA recipients in the United States? You saw those figures. You know them well.
Well, I got to tell you.
Oh, yeah, let's go to Bob on
me?
that. Let's go to Bob on that.
Brian, you mean? You want
I'm
me
sorry,
or-
let's go to Brian on that. Sorry, Brian.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's outrageous, and it could have happened here in Chicago as well, because we were one of the leading sanctuary cities that became a model for the country. I met the Steinles a few years ago. They're wonderful people. My heart goes out to them. They fought the good fight, as we all have. It's just a travesty of justice. So many of us can lay claim to the proverbial insult to injury, and it continues almost every day. There's hundreds of thousands of American family members every day that mourn the loss of their children and their siblings and their spouses. So with the Steinles, our prayers are with them, and with San Francisco, God help you out there. I don't know what's going on. I went to that pier last summer with my wife just to try to get some sense of what it was like, and it was tragic indeed.
Don, let's go to you. Speaking of San Francisco, your son was in law school in San Francisco back in 2010. He's no longer here to enjoy a holiday season. Your reaction, and then what about, we've heard nothing from Nancy Pelosi, we've heard nothing from Hillary Clinton, nothing from prominent Democrats on this case, zero.
Well, I'll tell you, I wasn't actually shocked in the least bit. I expected this to happen. I live out here. I see what happens every day. So I wasn't shocked at the two acquittals on the murder charges. I was marginally surprised that he didn't get the involuntary manslaughter, particularly since that's what the defense was using as their claim, that it was an accident. But even with that, you know, it's San Francisco, and the jury, you know, it's O.J. Simpson jury. We're not gonna convict you no matter what. I will tell you, though, you know, you mentioned Nancy Pelosi, and you can, you know, lay it on all the Democrats. It's inconceivable to me, and I find it reprehensible that they're worried about DACA recipients. I mean, the worst thing that would happen to any of those guys would be they'd get deported. The worst thing that's happened to, you know, Steve and Brian, myself, and so many others is they've lost a loved one. So our position, and you know, there's an organization we started called AVIAC, back in June, and we put out a position that DACA should not even be discussed until all the other illegal immigration issues are dealt with. So for them to talk about shutting down the government is just absolutely incredible.
Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer actually threatening to shut down the government because he cares more about handling and caring and the feeding of illegal immigrants than protecting the innocent lives of American citizens and legal immigrants in the United States. Because there are plenty of other prospective victims out there because of San Francisco's sanctuary city policies, California's state policies, Chicago's sanctuary city policies, and it goes on and on and on. And to all three of you, I will say this tonight. My heart breaks for you. Our viewers' hearts break for you. My radio listeners. Americans are infuriated by this. And the fact that politicians in both parties don't seal this border, build this wall, get this stuff done to protect us is an abomination. It has been for years, and now with this latest verdict, it's even worse.
Well, you know, Laura, we can't rely on the politicians out in California. They made the mess. So I'm actually announcing a little earlier than we had planned, but we're going to launch an initiative to not only repeal the sanctuary city or the sanctuary state bill that was just passed, but to also create law that requires law enforcement to cooperate with ICE and with federal officers. Good. So if anybody wants to look, the site's not really completely done yet, but it FightSanctuaryState.com, and we can really use people's help.
FightSanctuaryState.com. I'll get it on Facebook and Twitter. Well, all right, we'll get it right. I do that too late at night, but we'll get it right on Facebook and Twitter. We got to get the word out. People have to take the power back from the politicians who will not listen. Steve, I want to go to you because when I think about you, you're not too far from Phoenix, correct? You're right near the. Yeah. Okay. So you're not too far from the border. What do Arizonans, the average person on the street? I mean, I don't care if you're Hispanic, white, black. What does the average person on the street think of special treatment being given to people who break our laws and repeatedly come into our country, are deported, come back, commit crimes, and then get a slap on the wrist? Any sense from people in Arizona about this?
You know, a lot of my friends, people I work with, even people that I just meet that recognize me, you know, they're fed up. They're tired of it. It's you know, it's not just the murder of my son or the murder of Marianne Mendoza's son or Don's or Brian's. It's the drugs that are coming across. It's the
human trafficking, all of it.
And the ones that are coming across the border that are taking advantage of our social service systems.
Hospitals, having children here, having multiple children here. And, you know, we can't call them anchor babies. I'm sorry, but they're here. It's 9 months pregnant, they have their child, and then no one can ever deport them. Look, gentlemen, we're out of time, but I want to say to all of you, we're with you. The people of the country are with you. It's probably of little comfort to you now, given what's happened. But thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to be following every aspect of this case and others like it, sadly, as the days and weeks go on.